we budgeted transfer in the amount of $42,053 is what's in the budget. If you look at the budget that was passed in April, we're going to transfer a little bit less than that, and I don't have it in front of me because I didn't know you were going to ask about that tonight, but we can certainly get that.
Well, if it hadn't been on the agenda, I wouldn't ask tonight.
And I will have it in the next report, but it's slightly under that. It's a couple thousand under that, I think.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to get a clear picture of exactly how much money we have taken in that property tax increment. It wasn't the 42,000. Did we collect more than that?
Well, the 42, yeah, we collected 100 and, you can see there what we owe is 100 and, or this last year, or this current year, 173,818. Okay, so and that includes the bond service fee. What we received in the TIF increment is about, I'm guessing about $40,000 less than that. So we received about $133,000, and that's an approximate number. I'd have to go back and look and have that. That's very close. So I guess what you're trying to find out is how much did we have to pay out of the general fund because
Correct.
We didn't get it in the TIF increment, right? And the answer to that would be just about 40, between 40,000 and 40,500, somewhere in there. And like I said, I can get that for you as soon as I go downstairs. But that's.
Do you see that changing much in the future?
Well, it's hard to say. As you pointed out, we don't know what's going to happen with the major development within that TIF district, and if that, if the assessment on that diminishes, if it decreases, then we will not, that TIF increment. If it remains the same, that increment will stay the same. If for some reason it should increase, and I don't see how that's going to happen in the near future, then the TIF increment would increase. Our best hope would be that it would at least be the same and that other things would be developed in other properties that be further developed within that TIF district, and that the increment from those would would make up the difference between what we've been receiving and what we pay.
Do you remember, is the $132,000 that we collected from the TIF property tax about the same as it was last year?
Yes, it's pretty close. It's very close. It's very close.
So would that send us kind of a message that the value of the properties aren't
increasing as fast as we would like?
Yeah.
I would say that's fair to say. I would say that is, that's true. But, there's a long way to go and things can happen. You don't know, something else will be developed or improved. We still have a big question mark over the major development in that TIF district, and as you said, and I think once we see how that's resolved, we're going to know a lot more too.
It also seems as though there are more people that are exempting out.
I haven't seen that, but you may have more updated information than I do on that, because they could be in a stage where they've been, where they're applying for it, but it hasn't been granted.
I think anytime a building sells, the owner has the option to opt out of being in the TIF district, which of course then takes those funds down even further. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the theater just standing there.
And
and
there
what's
is.
going on
There is a
with
lot of uncertainty. I agree.
So I was just kind of curious because when that figure was different and it didn't correspond with the 500,000, and I did not go back to check if we always do that. If the figure that we are given for the GO bond, the abatement of the bond, does that always include that $500?
No, it does not.
Okay. I didn't think it did. So.
But it's in the budget. That 500 is always in the budget.
And so why would that change as far as whether we actually abate that much more, or why would that, rather than not abate it?
Let me go back. We have the abatement is based on the amount of the principal and the interest, but not the amount of the bond registrar fee, which is paid to the bank, in this case, State Bank.
But that's in this year's figure.
It's,
$400.
no, it's in the budget, but it's not in the, remember what you're looking at there is what we're gonna, in the tax levy is what we'll pay for the next year. So for the next year, it'd be $175,467.50, which would be June 1st of 2020 and December 1st of 2020.
Okay.
They'd be paying tax on it for the 2019, but it would be for the amount that we're paying our interest and principal that are, or the debt service that are due in 2020 in this case, because those are both with June 1st and December 1st of 2020 are within the same year. They're within the 2020.
So do we
2021
anticipate
fiscal
that come June 1st of 2020 that there will be money like the $40,000, or do we just
Well, I would assume that, because I know is,
take that from wherever?
we're going to have, I mean, we deal with that in the next budget, but there's no possible way we're going to see an additional increment in that amount between now and then. So it would have to be budgeted as a general fund transfer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak under public participation? Okay, moving down to the consent agenda, we have the payment of bills, approval of minutes, November 4th, 2019, regular city council meeting, November 12th, 2019, committee of the whole meeting, mayoral proclamation in honor of Zonta International Day on November 18th, 2019, which is its 100th anniversary. Request from Andrea Dykeman of AM Eats Cart and Catering to operate on 2 parking spaces on Kickapoo Street, adjoining Scully Park on Thursday, December 5th, 2019, from 4 until 8 p.m., and the approval of letter to U.S. Census Bureau establishing a U.S. Census 2020 complete count committee with Alderman Ron Keller as liaison and co-chairman.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mrs. Schmidt seconded. Discussion? Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of order. I will be abstaining, recusing myself from voting because 5E obviously mentions me as an appointment.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Abstain.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Under ordinances and resolutions, we have the ordinance extending Ameren, Illinois Company franchise agreement for 20 years to construct, operate, and maintain an electric utility system in the city of Lincoln.
Make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Ordinance extending Ameren, Illinois Company franchise agreement for 20 years to construct, operate, and maintain a gas utility system in the city of Lincoln.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mrs. Schmidt seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Resolution abating property tax for $2,285,000 GO bond series 2014 for tax year 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Ms. Horn seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Resolution abating property tax for $5,285,000 GO bonds series 2014 for tax year 2019.
So moved.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mrs. Schmidt seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Resolution abating property tax for $3,270,000 due bond series 2018 for tax year 2019.
Motion approved.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion, Ms. Horn seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Ordinance establishing hours of operation for cannabis dispensaries from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 12 until 6 p.m. on Sunday.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion, Mr. Parrott seconded. Discussion? Mr. Parrott.
First, I'd like to thank the council for showing some concern for the hours. I still am not in favor of it, of the hours. I think it should be more restrictive. However, I think it's interesting that some of the council has in times past said, why should we treat any other business any differently? And it just seems a little ironic that you would not keep the same hours as alcohol, as the liquor establishments. I will be voting no.
Mr. Bateman?
Well, all I can say is in my research and looking in Colorado and Washington and stuff, none of their hours were the same as alcohol establishments. So since this is a new field, I was just going on information that I came across. As I said last week, I came across some that are 8 a.m. to 9:50, just really odd hours.
They're different hours for liquor across the country as well, too. I just think it's a little ironic that the council would not, for those that were in favor of treating businesses the same, and if we were looking at this like alcohol, then I thought it was just a little ironic.
Mr. Welch?
So if you feel that way, you can make an amended motion to match the hours that we have for liquor.
No, because I myself, as I mentioned, I think they should be more restrictive.
Mr. Bateman?
One other thing I'd point out is that that this is more of a retail establishment where alcohol is more of a social type club. This is they're all listed as retail establishments. So it's more retail oriented hours.
Do you have a recommendation for what restricted hours would look like?
Any recommendation would not pass this council. So why?
Give it a whirl.
We can proceed with the vote.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
No.
Mrs. Horn? No. Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Since there was no other suggestion offered, I'm going to vote yes because it was discussed last week and that's what we decided to put on the agenda. So my vote is yes. Ordinance limiting the number of such dispensaries at 1.
I'd like to make a motion to change to 2.
I'll second.
Mr. Downs made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded.
Change to what?
To 2.
Okay, wait a minute.
From one establishment to two.
Alderman Schmidt.
Okay, first of all, last week we voted for 1. Okay, so when we voted this in the very beginning, it was for 1. It was said that we could only have 1, correct?
No, that was never
No, it was never said that we could only have one. It was said that It was said that there was possibility that there would only be one license given in this area.
Three
Possibility.
altogether, and then possibly one here, right? Is that it?
It's 3 in this area, and they can put them in whatever city allows them.
Okay, so if last week we voted for one, how can we, this same thing happened last time. Why, I
Mr.
vote for,
Mr. Hoblet.
Just a clarification, I believe there's some confusion surrounding this, so I'll try to do my best to clarify. There is 3 in this area, and when I say this area, it's quite a large geographic area in Illinois. So theoretically, we could, let's say for example, this council passed to allow 3. Theoretically, we could have all 3 of those. Now, the reality of such a large geographical area in Illinois and to point all 3 of them in Lincoln is highly unrealistic. Ms. Schmidt, I believe when you're indicating somewhat accurate, I believe the impression was from the council is that we would likely be getting one and that we were only desiring one at this time. But when we put this on the agenda, we didn't vote to put this on the agenda. We just put it on the agenda. Essentially, it was asked, and we put this amount on the agenda. It could still be amended at the time of voting. It could still be amended at the time of voting, but there was no vote really on the cow to approve of this at this time.
then we can discuss it though.
I just thought it was planning for the future. I don't think we're going to get 2. I mean, but eventually we may get 2, and I want to be ready for that if
Well, the thing is, so many of us said, we didn't even really, we're not gonna smoke it, we're not gonna go there, we don't agree with it, but then we want more of them? 1. I'm sorry, I just think it should be 1. I don't think it should be any at all, but if we're gonna have any, it should be 1. But I'd like to.
Mr. Keller? Anyone else have anything to offer? Okay. Mr. Hoblet?
So we'd be voting on the amendment for the 2 at this juncture.
Mr. Barrett?
So the vote is going to be on 2, and then we're going to vote on whether we're going to approve the 2.
For example, if we were voting on the amendment for the 2, okay, let's say the 2 passes, it'd be somewhat redundant then to go back and vote again on the 2 because you guys just voted on the 2, okay? Now, if the 2 passes, there's still the issue. If the amendment fails, then it goes back to the original what was put on the the agenda, that being the 1, okay?
Mr. Barrett?
And so I, originally before I thought this was going to happen, I was also going to thank the council for showing restraint on the number of, again, kind of a bit of the hypocrisy of allowing unlimited numbers of alcohol establishments, but yet limiting this to just 1, when again my preference is 0. And then also, it seemed like some of the council may have been working fairly closely with what is to be known as one interested party to submit an application for perhaps at the time maybe just 1 license. In so much that looking even at specific localities of the downtown area, which then would exclude perhaps the other entity that was known to be interested in applying for one that wouldn't be in the downtown area. And so just limiting it to just the 1 seems like we're pretty much hand-holding perhaps one or showing some favoritism to one establishment over another. And I'm not in favor of either, but it just seems a little not right.
Mr. Schmidt and then Mr. Bateman.
Well, my question is, why do we need 2? You said, what did you say? Future?
Yeah, it's just planning for the future when the dispensary licenses are more available, we'll have the option to expand to 2. if we get a license. Right now, it's highly unlikely we would get 2 licenses. I know that. But in the future, I believe that's going to change, and there'll be more licenses, and hopefully we will be ready for that if there is 2.
Why would you want more than one distribution places in Lincoln, Illinois? Why? But why? I just don't understand why. You say, is it for money?
Money's part of it, but I mean, competition, just so the one store isn't overwhelmed, people have choice, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Mr. Keller, did you have something to add? I'm sorry, Kevin.
First, yeah.
I would like to clarify that I have been contacted by no less than 4 different entities interested in the voting that's been going on. So there's 4 interested parties looking at if they get a license from the state of Illinois, possibly putting a dispensary in Lincoln.
At first there was one, just in the very beginning.
Mr. Keller?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I was just going to piggyback on what now's already been said, but yeah, competition I think is good to answer your question, Alderman Schmidt. And the reality, as Alderman Parrott did say, since there was one party that did approach us and presented it before the City Council, I think it gives the opportunity for, we don't even know if that application will ever be approved. I don't know if we'll even submit it. I would presume so, but we are not here to give a green light to one particular business here. I don't think that's what we're into. I think we're here to create some opportunity. That's what it's about for me.
So then, is your preference just 2 then, or are you open to unlimited then?
Well, I think, but I see, I'm open to 2, and because I do see the sensitive nature of it. If you're asking me, I'm sorry, I spoke. But if you're asking me, yeah, I do understand that there are people in this community who want it and people that don't want it. And maybe down the road it would be open to 3, maybe open to 4, who knows? But at this point, I think 2 is a good number to allow competition, but also to recognize the sensitive nature of this particular topic.
Mr. Welch, did you have your hand up? Or Ms. Schmidt? So I'm going to ask a question. Sam, you said earlier to have 2 just because, but couldn't it be amended later on to add another one?
Yeah, it could.
Okay. Tracy?
So that's why last week when I requested this be put on the agenda is what this council talked about. We did it. I know liquor is a whole bad topic with this council, but that's how we ended up with unlimited, is because we had a restrictive number of people that wanted to expand their business. The council heard that discussion. Regardless of how we got there, we had a discussion about it and amended the ordinance. So we either set a number higher than 1 now, or the future council has a discussion about it. I'm personally not against either direction, so I'm fine with 1, I'm fine with 2.
Mr. Bateman?
My agreement with 2 is basically what Mr. Downs is saying, and Mr. Keller, and what Tracy just pointed on, is we started out with X amount of number of liquor licenses, X amount of number of gaming licenses, and each time a business comes forward, they have to go jump through the hoops to open a business. I just was open to the idea of 2, so that as restrictive as Illinois is going to be with these licenses, at least we would be open to 2, so that if one company gets a license and the next company on the same day gets a license and they're both looking at Lincoln, we're not restricting one or the other, or then it becomes a competition of who we grant it to. That was my thought. It just gives a business opportunity. That's where I'm at on this thing. I got people that overwhelmingly support this. I know people think I'm lying when I say that, but it's the truth. And I'll never walk into an establishment. You're not forced to go in there. I just feel by going with 2, if there is some possibility within a year or 2, a second license comes due, or if 2 licenses come up from the 2 different companies or whatever, we're not sitting here having the same discussion again in the very near future.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
So Sam made the motion and
And Mr. Keller
Keller
seconded.
seconded. Okay. Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
No.
Mrs. Horn?
No.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
I'm surprised. I've thought about this one long and hard, and I have to vote no. I would rather start with one and see what happens and go from there. So my vote is no.
So now the vote is on the original motion of 1. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Kevin made the motion, Steve seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
No.
Mrs. Horn?
No.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
My answer is yes on this one, so. Moving down to reports. Mr. Gonzo.
Thank you, Mayor. Since we are halfway, just over halfway now through the fiscal year, I thought it might be useful to look at some of the principal revenue streams that we have and where we stand with regard to those. First of all, first page, you see our fund balances. I think they speak for themselves. Nothing unusual to report there. They're holding up well, and you'll see there the receipts from during the month of October, our sales tax, municipal sales tax, state use tax numbers, and income tax numbers were all higher than they were a year ago, and I won't go into as much as a comparison on a month-by-month basis, but I will talk a little bit more about those. And you can also see the motor fuel tax for September, and you have that extra distribution in there again. Similar situation to what we saw last month, where the base amount is down, but because they increased the motor fuel tax, a portion of that goes to municipalities and to other units of government is does represent an overall increase in that. If you look at the second page, I've got the balances in the police fire pension fund, and we saw nice increases there as well. A good bit of that is due to the fact that the stock market did well during the month of October, and as long as that trend continues, you're going to see these balances continue. As I've said before, we struggled to get above 10 million in the police pension fund. We're now at 10,256,000 plus, and in the fire pension fund, we're actually moving up toward 6 million. We're at 5,873,710. Here's the downside. Here's the bad thing. In my opinion, this isn't the best thing. The state of Illinois the legislature of the state of Illinois has voted to consolidate all what they call the downstate police pension funds and the downstate fire pension funds. And I don't know all the particulars of it yet. That was just passed toward the end of last week, so we'll know more about it as we get further into it. The Municipal League took a position in favor of it, which does not necessarily mean it's good for us. They represent the municipalities all over the state, many of which are severely underfunded in their police and fire pensions. They represent, contrary to what the name would imply, they also represent all the suburban Chicago area pension funds, and a lot of those are underfunded. They represent every police and fire pension fund, or the consolidation will include every police and fire pension fund in the state of Illinois except the city of Chicago. So there's a wide variety in terms of the size of those municipalities and the size of those funds. I'm told that what we will still have, whatever we eventually transfer into that fund will remain. There'll be a record of that, and it'll be similar to what we get with the IMRF, and what we get there is an annual. In fact, we're going to get it probably next week. We get an annual statement from the IMRF telling us what our percentage of payroll contribution it must be for that fund. You'll see the same thing happen with these. this is going to be phased in over a couple of years, so this isn't something we're going to know all about immediately. There's going to be a lot of benchmarks in it, and I'll try to keep you updated on it as best as I can as we go through it. And hopefully I'm wrong, and it'll be more beneficial than it would appear at first. The next pages are the balance in each fund. I won't go into those. I did include some attachments that are a little different than I usually do. And the purpose of this is to kind of show you where we are halfway through the year. The first of those, you'll see it's the general fund, and it's the primary sources of revenue. Most of those are distributed through the state of Illinois, with the exception of the utility tax, which is distributed by Ameren. And you can see on a lot of those we're pretty good shape. The replacement tax, we're at 87%. I think what's happened there, and I know what's happened there, is the replacement tax in past years, the state's kind of used that to fund different things, and they've kind of rated the local portion of that. This year, they don't seem to be doing that to that extent, and so we're seeing a lot better results there. The other things are some of the other things, direct results of economic activity here in Lincoln, including the municipal sales tax. And you see, and that includes, for purposes of line that we receipt that into, the state use tax and the sales tax. We're at 56%, which is very good, and you can see that is by far the largest revenue stream that we have in the general fund. Telecommunications tax, very bad situation there. Fortunately, it is, a lot smaller source, but we're well under where we should be. And what we've seen in the last year is a decline in that. We used to see about a $24,000 a month receipts from the telecommunications tax. The last several months we've been down as low as about 18,000. And the reason for that is a lot of this is on landline phones. There continues to be a decline in the number of people with those. So those of us who have those are paying the same tax, but the receipts from it are far less. And unless the legislature takes some action to equalize that, you're going to continue to see that where it is. I think about 3 months ago, Mrs. Rolfs, you asked about this because it is one of the pledged revenue streams for the general obligation bond, the alternate revenue bond for the TIF, the TIF increment, and then the telecommunications tax. Now we need those together need to be at 125% of whatever our annual payment is, and so far we're not anywhere close. We're not near that far down, so we're still in good shape there. But this is something to be concerned about. I don't know if this is going to bottom out at 17,000 or 15,000, or if it's going to go up if the legislature takes some action to assess some other type of tax on electronic devices. The utility tax, there's another. That's the other one that we've seen a decline in. We've talked about that at length and the reasons for that. State income tax looks real good. We're over, well over where we had anticipated being, and then the pull tabs and jar games. That's a once a year payment, so we finished at 103.36% of what we budgeted. That's not going to go up. It's not going to go down because we received the one-time payment for that. And then the video gaming tax, we're well ahead of what we projected. So those are all good things. The two areas there that are of concern, the telecommunications tax and the utility tax, which are well under what we had hoped for. I did include the utility tax table, which shows what we received in October. For the month of September, it's $56,847, which is down from $75,105 a year ago. And for the reasons we've cited, we've seen a major plant closing near and an extremely large retail grocery store that have both closed within that time period. The next page is the general fund. It's 2 pages, actually. General fund revenues. It breaks it down by some very small increments, things like, pool, billiard hall licenses and, things like that that are relatively small amounts, but it totals it. If you look at the bottom line there on the second page of that, our general fund revenues are at 55.62% of what we budgeted. So that's very good. And, some of the, we saw a decline in some things, but we saw increases in a lot of things too. So we should be very happy with that. Motor fuel tax, I've got an attachment on that. 59% of budget through the first 6 months, again, due to that extra payment that we talked about. And then the non-home rule sales tax, we're right, can be too much closer. We're at 50.32% of what we had budgeted. So that tells us our budget projections on this look pretty good so far, and hope for the best in the remaining 6 months of the year. And that's all I have.
Questions for Mr. Conzo? Thank you very much. Mrs. Baker?
The sewer receipts collected in the month of October were $234,981.81. We did not receive no payments from either prisons again this month, last month rather.
Any questions? Thank you. And department head reports either on file or will be. Under new business and communications, we have the approval of proposal for health insurance plans from Health Alliance for calendar year 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
Kathy Horn made the motion. Jeff seconded. Peggy?
Last week when Nancy Schaub was here, we had it narrowed down to Health Alliance, but we hadn't picked the particular plan, which one. We went with the alternate on the HMO, PPO, and the HSA, and then we added the higher deductible plan, which is an HSA, which it'd be like, we did this mainly for somebody that wanted to add a family. It was a higher deductible, but it was more affordable if you needed to add your whole entire family. For the other three, yes, the deductible did go up for each plan. It was lower cost for the city as an employee rate, but then on the employee plus children, if you want to add extra people onto your plan, it was more affordable to add them, since the employee pays that 100% of their people to add on. So Nancy Schaub, looking at it, she said that if everybody stays on the same plan that they are currently, instead of the 19% increase, it would only cost 2.4% increase. And in the past, not very many people ever change those plans. They pretty well stay. Maybe one or two people might change, but everybody pretty well stays the same. So going from 19 to 2.4 was a big difference.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Abstain.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Approval of annual payment plan for municipal lease between Motorola Solutions and the City of Lincoln for the Starcom system.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Keller made the motion. Mr. Welch seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Approval of contract for printer maintenance laser cartridges for Konica Minolta for the period beginning October 25th, 2019 and continuing through April 30th, 2023. This was tabled from November 4th, 2019.
Motion to approve. Motion to remove it from the table.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Bateman seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bateman?
This is just to take
it
off the table. Correct. Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Would like to make a motion to remove this. If that doesn't pass, I would be voting no, because with my experience with these kind of contracts, if we don't have a set guideline of usage, it's nearly impossible for them to write a contract. And this is a brand-new printer that she has not had long enough to determine what the amount of usage we have. So I have a very strong gut feeling that we would greatly exceed the amount of that contract, and then we would be subject to their overage bills.
Second, or
Second.
Mr. Keller seconded? Discussion?
So the vote is to remove it from the agenda?
Mr. Schmidt?
So what does this mean as far as, what's this mean? There's no maintenance agreement then?
Mr. Howlett, you have a comment?
I mean, he has voting to remove from the agenda, but if you guys vote on it and it doesn't pass, then by virtue of it not passing, it's removed from the agenda.
Yeah.
So I don't really see the point for a separate vote to remove from the agenda.
So the vote would be yes or no to approve it, and if the vote is not to approve it, it's removed from the agenda?
As written, it's an approval.
Yeah, I think I seconded. I'll withdraw.
I'll withdraw.
Okay.
Someone's got to make a motion to approve.
We need another motion to approve as it's written.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Trace made the motion, Sam seconded. Discussion? I'm sorry, Ron?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So again, just to be clear, what's our option? If this fails, what's the options?
I'm just back to ordering cartridges.
And what's the cost on those, comparatively speaking?
They had, through Staples, where we have a contract, they had been like $104 a piece, and they're down to like 95, I think. I'm losing my voice. And I need 4.
How often?
I don't know, it's so new, I don't know yet. But I'll probably be out of my budget by that point.
Anthony Schmidt?
So then what do you do when you're out of your budget?
I guess I sit there and don't do anything on my printer, or I don't know, or send it down to city clerk's office, and sometimes we don't get the document. Sometimes it doesn't connect over there, but I'll do whatever I have to do. Maybe I'll bring my own in, I guess.
Soren?
So how much are the cartridges? They're $35 if this agreement goes through?
$35 a month, and the reason, and I've called her 2 times again since this last week, and she's not answering. I've emailed her as well. I'm not getting an answer. Since we have Minolta already have that the contracts with the other departments, they were giving me a break because it's just a little HP. So that's what they were doing. I don't know about the rest of it.
So Beth, you've reached out multiple times to this company, and a gentleman had left. The people that you're trying to contact, they don't get back with you. Doesn't that give you some concern about this and what their agreement's going to be and how they're going to provide service and such? I just don't have a good feeling about them.
Okay, let me give you a little background. Our person we had as a wonderful rep quit for medical reasons. So then they brought this gentleman in, and he even told me right from the beginning it was kind of like a bridge job for him. But then he gave his notice, but he didn't give it up, I guess, the level it needed to be, and they didn't know he was leaving, and he did leave. So then they honored what he had said. They went back and found the contract he had been working on, and they were going to agree with it. I've asked her. These cartridges are, a lot more than $35 a month. So, I mean, I'm not naive with that, but I understand that she thought they were helping out because of all this misunderstanding and everything. They were helping the city, and I think they probably want our business in the future. So that's what I think they were doing.
Ms. Schmidt?
So, did you say that the same company has contracts with the rest of the city?
Yes, yes. For the other big machines, like the one we have in the city clerk's office, up in the fire department, at the police department, yes. And I've got my little Hewlett-Packard.
So my question is, if they have been good with the other contracts, why would we think for a minute they wouldn't be good with this one?
We just probably, city clerk and I talked, we probably just don't have enough data to show that we've used it, to.
So it's more the
So
machine.
it could be they come back in, and she did show me in the contract where I didn't see that part on the attachment A, that it does have it in there, but she'd assured me, so it's whatever you want to do.
Mr. Howlett?
To present, not to stick my nose in too much, but to present another option to this council, if they're looking for time, is to see as to whether or not her usage of this new printer needs to be more established. Her rate of usage, I suppose it could be tabled again until we find out, as to how much you do use of it.
And that's just such a variable because we are coming almost to the end now with all of the Fifth Street Road that I've had to make a lot of copies for with all the legal documents. So we are getting closer to the end on that, so probably the usage will go down.
Mr. Downs?
So can we table it for until we can get a better baseline?
Mr. Welch, Mr. Howlett?
So how close are you to needing to purchase new cartridges?
Well, I probably need, maybe within the next week or two, I'll probably have to order, but maybe not. It just depends. I'll go check it tomorrow, see how many copies I have available yet. It kind of gives me an idea how much I have left. But the thing is, I will have to move some funds from one account to the other. We'll have to make an amendment for the city council to approve that at the next council meeting or whenever we do that. I'll have to talk with Mr. Conzo about moving some money around.
So do you mean from moving money from one of your sub-line items?
Correct. Yes.
Mr. Howlett? Further discussion? Mr. Kelly?
Well, I guess I'm in favor of tabling. I'm fine with that. But on the other hand, I guess we have a responsibility here, but also I don't want to disable or disarm our city administrator from doing her job effectively. And I feel sometimes we're making that mistake. We're micromanaging a little bit. I think we have a vested interest in ensuring the contract and agreement fulfills the obligations that we needed to do to protect ourselves. But on the other hand, I just feel sometimes we're veering into that category and not allowing her to do her job. So we can table it, and I suppose we can get a read on these new cartridges, but if this doesn't work out, I'm in favor of bringing this back up and see what we can do.
Jeff?
If I'm not mistaken, also in that contract, there is a 30-day notice to terminate from either party. So if we get behind the 8 ball, we might get stuck maybe 1 month with a additional charge, but then we can give notice that we want out too. So that might help things a little bit.
Tracy?
Yeah, I think Alderman Hoineke kind of said what I was going to. My concern is that we're going to table this. That's another 2 weeks before we have a discussion again, which will turn into another discussion, which is another 2 weeks. We're a month down the road. Now we're $400 more deep into cartridges, and we have a 30-day out clause. So if the $35, they cover it for the first month, we get 2 or 3 months down the road, we start to see increased charges, then we exercise the 30-day out. But I just think that we're crippling the administrator in trying to do her job by scrutinizing this printer as much as we have.
John?
Okay, then just to clarify, no one's made a motion to table at this juncture. We're still on at this time for the actual vote here. So guys want to proceed at this time, we're still at that stage, so.
Mr. Barrett, did you?
So do we need a motion on this? Oh, motion. Has it already been motioned?
Yes. To approve. Are there any other questions or discussion?
And there's a second.
Yes. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
No.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Do we have any announcements? Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, just real quick, and I apologize because when I was kind of thinking about F and G, while we approve the consent agenda on the minutes for November 4th, I just want to kind of clarify in there. It says Alderman Schmidt said she disagreed and wanted it at least 250 feet, speaking about the distance away from churches and schools. Alderman Parrott agreed with Alderman Schmidt. The next sentence says it would be 100 feet for both churches and schools. The way that it reads, it seems as though both Alderman Schmidt and myself agreed that it should also be one. It just seems very confusing the way it was worded, and I don't know if it could have been written differently so it didn't seem so confusing. But we've already approved it, so I think it's a done deal.
Kevin?
I think we can correct the minutes. If my memory serves me correctly, Mr. Downs made the motion for 100 feet and I seconded it. You amended the motion to 100 feet and I seconded it, and that amendment passed.
That's true. It's just, it doesn't read that way. It reads as though, the last communication was Alderman Schmidt and myself, and then it says it would be 100 feet for both churches and schools. It doesn't flow as to who or why, it reads that way. And so it just seems kind of confusing. Well, I don't know if it seems confusing, but it's not accurate the way that it reads to me.
Can we bring those minutes back to the following? Well, we can amend them through another act of the council, correct?
I'd have to look into that one. I'm sorry, I don't know that one off the top of my head. One would think that, we've already voted and passed them. So if there's any due diligence to be done, it would have been done before we passed them. But having said that, I would think there would have to be some sort of relief that could be sought, for after the fact corrections.
Yeah, I believe, because Steve, we've done this before in the past, where an alderman who votes in favor of an item can bring it back for rediscussion and a vote for consideration. Because I forget what it was, but I believe you did that at one point too.
It was for the paver system, I believe.
Yeah, you brought it back the following week, actually, right? So we can let Mr. Hoblet look into it, but I do believe that there's a process in place for that.
I mean, if there isn't, if you could just make that last sentence a paragraph in itself.
I think the concern, though, is altering it after it's been voted on.
Right.
If you don't bring it up next week, I can.
Okay.
Other announcements? Grace?
No announcement. Make a motion that we go into executive session under 2C1 personnel.
You have a second?
Second.
Trace made the motion, Jeff seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
8:06, we will go into executive session. There will not be future city business. Thank you.